Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this continuation of the Winter 2023 SIGGRAPH Educator Committee Soiree. We are now in session 2, and presenting here we have Johannes DeYoung, Rebecca Perry, and William Joel. And for this set of presentations, we'll start with Johannes DeYoung.
Thank you, Nick. I have submitted a fast forward video, and it includes audio narration, so I'm sure to keep this to 1 minute. I'll just start by saying I'm Johannes DeYoung, and I'm a faculty member at Carnegie Mellon University School of Art.
Effervescent Shadow Bazaar was an evening-length immersive art and music experience that combined light and shadow animation, ambisonic 3D soundscapes, interactive video installations, and electronic sensory devices. The 2-hour event was presented in 3 parts at WQED Studios in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in December 2022. Explorable interactive artworks commingled with live music and computational art performances. Artistic directors Johannes DeYoung, Anie Shea, Lance LeDuc, Aaron Malaya, Jesse Stiles, and Robert Zacharias led organization of the event as a co-production of Carnegie Mellon University School of Art, School of Music, and the Integrative Design Arts and Technology program. The event featured 52 artists and designers working in shadow play and electronic logics and creative practice studios, as well as electronic sound artists and a low brass ensemble that included members of Carnegie Mellon's Exploded Ensemble and the Tartan Tuba Band.
Thank you. That was Effervescent Shadow Bazaar, and I am happy to elaborate in the Q&A.
Wonderful. Thank you. So that brings us to Dr. Rebecca Perry.
I'm going to share a quick presentation and be very, very different, but it'll be me talking fast for 5 minutes. So I'm Rebecca Perry, and I head the training and development efforts for Lux Machina, Halon, and Prism Stages, which is all part of NEP Virtual Studios. And before joining NEP, I had a related role with the Epic Games Virtual Production Fellowships, and I've been involved in virtual production, education, and training for a few years. I also taught at the University of Virginia for a while. In 2020, film production ground to a halt as the pandemic caused a realignment of how we all work together. Professionals in large collaborative workspaces like film sets and sound stages began a transformation to different kinds of interactions, including more remote work and limited, masked, and tested in-person interactions on set. Simultaneously, changes in filmmaking production techniques were taking place, generally termed virtual production. The new workflows moved work previously done as post-production and some of the creative collaboration processes to the start of production, which required new skills and new ways of thinking and planning. So large wraparound LED stages could now display CG content created in game engines like Unreal Engine. And by syncing virtual and physical cameras, in-camera visual effects, ICVFX, creates these parallax effects in real time and allowing you to mix virtual and physical elements in the camera instead of compositing them in post-production. The new ICVFX workflows are proving to be one of the most consequential post-pandemic production film technologies, and there was a great demand for ICVFX skills among film production workers as filming restarted post-pandemic. But how do you teach these complex skills to a global community of very busy professionals? So in Q4 2020, I oversaw the creation and delivery of an ICVFX course as a collaboration between Epic Games and Lux Machina. The course was based on Epic's ICVFX fellowship and used instructors who had been teaching this course for Epic, including 2 guest instructors, and we had 4 guest speakers. And we condensed Epic's 3-week course into 6 lecture days and 2 stage days. We had 48 enrolled participants, educators from 4 institutions. And this took place in a number of time zones, 3 time zones. Took place in California. The instructors are mostly in California, New York, and Bristol were the students. So the logistics were challenging, especially scheduling workable times for instructors in California and learners in New York and Bristol. Also, the New York stage used a different camera tracking system. Instructors learned on Epic's Moses, and Zero Space had a Stife Red Spy system, and that had to be reconfigured to work with Unreal Engine. So instead of Disguise, so Lux sent a team to New York. The workflow the task was complex. So you had to bring this geographically dispersed cohort together and also give them the physical experience of an LED stage in these different time zones. So developing the content was also very complex. We used Zoom, we used groups in 3 time zones, able to listen to live presentations by instructors and ask questions in real time, both in Zoom and on Slack. The lightly edited recordings were posted on our course Vimeo channel. The Slack channel was monitored by instructors who answered questions as the class was in progress. And the final edited recordings were preserved and eventually became available for other audiences, including internal NEP learners. So there was this flow of content throughout the course, and at an accelerated pace, basically. And we also had a private Vimeo channel and Slack channels. These were key technologies to keep the live conversation moving, and also provide an ability for people to review and look at content after the fact. So these are photos of some of the different types of interactions that were going on. And, so there were 6 course days, Zoom instruction, live lectures and Q&A. And then each group went to a separate stage. The UK people went to a stage in Bristol called Pitch, and the New York people went to a stage called Zero Space. And they were all able to see virtual production technologies and get some kind of a hands-on experience. So the takeaways from this, hybrid teaching can provide a good quality experience, especially for busy people. Time shifting can work, provided you choose times that are reasonable for everybody. Collaboration with industry partners is the key to making this work, especially the in-person element. We borrowed stages from Pitch and from Zero Space. The rapid evolution of VP technologies make this teaching approach more important than ever. So people are not able to, especially professionals, have a very hard time taking actual time off from work to go to a physical classroom or even sit in on a complete Zoom session. So this was kind of a way of meeting people where they are and giving them the best quality experience and a balance of physical and virtual teaching. So, just-in-time education is another way of looking at this. It's a very useful tool for working professionals in the entertainment industry. It's more engaging and personal than YouTube tutorials, but allows a widely dispersed cohort to participate, network, and learn together. Some of the challenges are people with different backgrounds. Not everybody knew Unreal Engine to the same degree. People have different equipment. People have different abilities to work with Zoom and with Slack. But if you can, and there was very little time for ramping up to teach people that on the spot. So those were some of the challenges. But most people rose to the challenge beautifully. And I look forward to any questions. Thank you.
Oh, there will be many. Thanks, Rebecca. William Joel.
Before I get into my presentation, I just want to give a huge applause to Johannes and Rebecca for the work they've been doing, because when I get through my presentation, you're going to realize that what I'm proposing we need to do more of in education, they're doing already. Okay, but I still think that they are the tip of the iceberg of what can be done, and that there's a hell of a lot of other schools, institutions that really should, up their game, and it doesn't take much to up the game. This presentation is like, why undergraduate research? Well, first, let's just start with a little definition, because I love definitions. Research: careful study of a given subject, field, or problem undertaken to discover facts or principles. 2, an act or period of such study. And 3, diligent inquiry, examination, or study, laborious or continued search after facts or principles, investigation as microscopical research, historical researches, etc. Now, right away, you're gonna see right away, there's nothing to do here in this definition that says it's only about math and science. That's not really true. And that's what people falsely assume, that only professors and or graduate students are involved in research. And that's not really true. Research is integrated into many undergraduate academic courses throughout the world, but it's not as much as probably it should be. And often research is going to be integrated into what are called capstone experiences for many majors. Now, What is undergraduate research? It runs the gamut from biology research in a laboratory, which people think about, to something akin to what, Johannes was talking about, music performance. And his was not necessarily a senior honors recital, but there was a music component to it. Though research conjures images of white lab coats, creative activities expand the definition of research to a modern and interdisciplinary realm, from 2D artwork to live performances to artistic historical investigations. Now, some of the benefits for students. Students participate in undergraduate research. They may have increased persistence. They more of a stick-to-itiveness, increased interest in and pursuit of entrance into graduate school. They may like what they're doing enough that they want to study more, find out more. Higher gains in research skills, including gathering and analyzing data and speaking effectively. Gains in professional advancement, professional development, and personal development. And this last one I think is really important. Shows increasing retention amongst and opens career pathways for minorities and underrepresented populations. Now, a bit of a history. The group that I direct, it's called the Computer Graphics and Animation Research Projects, and the initiative was established during SIGGRAPH 2019. Basically, CGNARP develops research projects and then seeks undergraduate students worldwide to staff the project teams. And we try to look for students who, these are things they wouldn't normally get to do in their own schools. And initially, students and faculty from over 24 schools expressed interest in CGNARP. And then in 2020, COVID struck. But as of SIGGRAPH 22, CGNARP has emerged from the ashes and is in the process of reestablishing project teams. Currently, there are 3 projects in various stages of completion. One is automatic integration of 2D elements into 3D animation, then stop motion effect filter for keyframe animation, and last, an analysis of artist use of 2D drawing applications. I'm quickly going over these 3. Dealing with the 2D elements in 3D animations, that's basically an exploration of how studios have begun to add 2D elements to 3D animations and the subsequent development of automatic methods. So in phase 1, we're reviewing the current literature regarding the integration of 2D elements in 3D animation. We're doing that right now. Identify 2D elements that have either not been addressed or have elicited minimal research, and identify a 2D element that could benefit from an automatic method. That will come after the literature review. In phase 2, we'll develop a method for automatically incorporating a given 2D element into 3D animations, and then create software to instantiate the method. In the stop motion effect filter for keyframe animation, basically we're saying that stop motion animation has a unique look and feel due to the process utilized by animators. So the first phase is determine which aspects of stop motion animation process produce the unique style, and then document these aspects in writing. And both of those are in process right now. In phase 2, what we'll do is we'll develop a method for adding a stop motion effect to keyframe animations. And then based on this method, create a stop motion effect filter for a typical animation platform, to be determined. And the third project, which is kind of on a back burner right now, is analysis of artist use of 2D drawing applications, where each artist has a unique way of using 2D drawing applications to produce final works. So in phase 1, what we plan to do is supply artists with a 2D drawing application that has been modified to record each action taken by a user and the time the actions were performed. Now, is this going to be every single action? For the most part, but not necessarily everything that the artist does, just the main things. And then we're going to ask the artist to draw a pre-specified object. We'll then take the data acquired by this and statistically analyze the data. And then in phase 2, we're going to utilize the acquired statistic develop method that will duplicate, hopefully, a given artist process. Part of this, by the way, arose because a lot of the machine learning that's occurring today studies the end of the artistic process. In other words, the works of art, and tries to duplicate what the quote unquote AI, and then I have issues with AI, but I'll leave that to the side. What these AI systems do is they look at they have this wide collection of work by a given artist, and they try to replicate the style of the artist by modifying existing images or maybe creating new images. But what they don't really do, because they're looking at the end result, is they don't deal with the process itself. So that's what this project's about. Now, some future goals. We'd like to have a minimum of 4 projects in process at any time. So right now we've got 2 projects which are in process. Third one is kind of on a back burner for the time being. And then by having 4 projects, this will allow new student members a choice of projects to join. We're going to seek new student faculty to join the group. We're going to seek companies to provide knowledge and or products to support projects. And Rebecca nailed this right away. You really need industry support, not just for the materials they can provide, hardware, software, but for knowledge. We want to then distribute the findings as submissions to conferences and or professional publications, as well as online. And then freely distribute all software via services such as GitHub, and produce white papers relating to the development management of research projects staffed by undergraduate students. In other words, we will produce documentation about the projects, and then we're going to produce meta documentation, i.e. documents that talk about the process that was used to create these projects, have them managed, etc. Not the projects themselves, but the framework and what worked and what didn't. And more importantly, have fun. And if anybody is interested, that's the website for the group. And that's my email address where you can contact me. And I'll leave that up for a second or two.
Excellent. And we will be, and we'll be posting these to YouTube as well, so folks will be able to refer back to those. So I don't know if you know, whether it's the attendees or yourselves as presenters kind of caught on to the theme of this particular session, but one of the things that I feel like is a trademark of all 3 of these subjects is just the sheer complexity of thinking about how to put these things together. Mm-hmm. I'll share that personally, one of my favorite quotes is attributed to Walt Disney, and that is, "It's kind of fun to do the impossible." And so my first question for all 3 panelists is, did you run into any resistance to participating or creating what you've initiated here and shared with us? And if so, how did you manage to get past that? How did you navigate that? And well, we did it anyway. So I'm going to go in the same order of the original presentation, and we'll just go Johannes, Rebecca, and William. And so, I mean, Johannes, the number of different things that were happening at your Bazaar is phenomenal. I was like, oh, this is a great idea. I wonder if I could do this. And then I kept seeing more things and more things. Like, I don't even know where to start. So did you run into any resistance? And how did you get through that?
No, we didn't run into any resistance this time around. But the first time I did this at Carnegie Mellon, I was teaching an animation studio class that had run for a number of years before I joined the faculty. And the people who took that class had very different expectations than I did at the outset for what we were going to be doing that semester. So we had similar partners in the School of Music and the Integrative Design Arts and Technology program. We were doing an event at the Children's Museum in Pittsburgh. And all semester I was beating the drum to get people excited about this idea, but really the students wanted to like stay behind their computers and make short films, and that was kind of like the safe zone that we were operating in. And the event turned out great, but there was a lot of resistance leading up to that final event from within the class, not from within our partners or across the university or external to the university. But after that, I think that we had something to show future classes to say, this is what's come before, look what we can do now. And then also kind of reframing the exact nature of the class was helpful too. So as years have progressed, I've been giving the advanced animation studio classes more topical themes that kind of set a conceptual framework for where we're headed. And that's very helpful.
Fantastic. How about Rebecca? I mean, teaching essentially a skill set that generally needs to be in person across multiple time zones, across multiple organizations. Was there any resistance to this idea, and how did you get past that?
Yeah, the Epic Fellowships sort of got this going during the pandemic when everybody was out of work and everybody had free time. And when we started that, it was an easy sell, basically. Hey, you've got free time. Here's something you can learn. Now, of course, it's a much greater challenge because people are back, production is back, everyone's working. And you would think, okay, well, now there's resistance from the students because, the learners, because they don't have time. No, it was not that, actually. They're still hungry for information and they're willing to fit it into the odd hours of their day, if possible. The resistance kind of came from, I would say, some of the instructors, because they were, it's instruction of any kind, as everyone here knows, is a delicate process where you sort of try to meet your audience where they are, and you sort of do this mind meld knowledge transfer. And if the audience is incredibly dispersed and you're not sure what the tools for the transfer are going to be, that makes it very, there's a lot of anxiety about that among instructors, I think. They're trying to figure out, how am I going to get these ideas across with using not the usual tool set. So, but that was, just a momentary thing. We did get past that, and everybody had a good experience. I mean, they're used to teaching remotely, but teaching something that requires a significant hands-on component. We were fortunate that the instructors had access to their own stage, and they were able to stand there and teach with the backdrop of the tools they needed. And then later the students were able to encounter those things. So, it wasn't perfect, but it was a bit asynchronous, but it worked well. And I think everybody came away feeling that they'd had a satisfying experience. So.
Excellent. And I'm just going to note to the attendees that if you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A feature of Zoom. We'll keep an eye on that as panelists. And William, I think there's something that Rebecca has shared that it was interesting that, that some of the resistance she encountered was the instructors on the instructor side. And, with your experience, you have vast experience here in the educational field.
Yeah.
I imagine that doesn't sound unusual.
Unusual? No, that is par for the course, actually. Well, let me just back up. What I presented today was the whole idea of doing undergraduate research, because this is one of my new initiatives with SIGGRAPH and the graphics community, starting again back in 2019. And pretty much because of COVID, we're just now getting ourselves back organized. But I'm going to shift to another group, which I started back in 2016, the Massive Collaborative Animation Projects. Johannes and I are both on steering committee. And when we first started out, one of the things we said is we want to have students, undergraduates worldwide working on project teams to develop animations. We, as a steering committee, we established the production, parameters, and then we go look for students and perhaps even entire classes with a faculty member who wants to work with us. And the pushback we got, and Rebecca's going to go, yeah, with same thing. Unless it fits for some faculty, unless it fits perfectly into the curriculum they've already established for their course, it's a non-starter. That the faculty have to really buy into it. And we had some cases where we were trying to talk to faculty who we knew as friends through SIGGRAPH. They were on the committees with us, with the ed committee, and couldn't make it work because it would demand, with respect to the faculty member, too many changes to the curriculum they had established for that course, and they just weren't going to touch it. It helps if you can create maybe standalone courses, one-shot special topics, etc. That can work, but that was a real pushback from faculty, and that was kind of disheartening. So the ones that did work, where there were specific schools that were tied in. For example, Johannes had a project that he started and wrapped up because I believe it was your school and another school, and it was a summer special course, and that was a project under the banner of MCAP, and it worked. Whereas other things we've tried didn't work. So yeah, it is. I mean, beyond the geographical issues, time zones, etc., there are the social, personal issues of getting people who have the power to work together. But that doesn't stop us from these two groups. That doesn't stop us from keep trying. MCAP is still in business. It's still working. Our latest project, which I'm actually shepherding, we had the same problem with COVID. It kind of went because of COVID. And which I'm trying desperately to get it back in gear, but I have this feeling that we may just want to say, okay, it got hurt enough by the pandemic to make it work anymore. But we're still working, and maybe even this year coming up, we'll start another project. And with the research, I've got a good handful of students in CJ and RP who are working with me on these various projects, and it's working kind of well. In fact, one of the projects, the one for stop motion animation filter, the lead student right now is in the country of Colombia. That's where he's from. So you can get it to work, but you have to be patient and you have to keep at it. And you also have to have extremely good social skills to talk to the different people who you need to get involved in the projects.
So I as a follow-up, and for this set of responses, we'll bounce backwards, right? So I'll start with William, go through Rebecca to Johannes on this one. It sounds like there may have been some surprising or really interesting outcomes from these projects, from all of the presentations. And so, with the challenges, difficulties aside, one, I'm curious about, highlighting one of those benefits that you might have seen. In particular, I feel like each one of these has a way of reaching to a constituency that might not have otherwise had access to the type of experience that you provided. And so I'm wondering if you have even anecdotally, a success story that came out of it that might be encouraging to others that might want to take on something like this. And if you have, any thoughts for others to encourage others to try something like what you've done. So William, I mean, in your very presentation, you had a bullet point about how there were benefits, particularly that for some populations that are traditionally underserved. And so I was wondering, what might be an example of that? And, if you have any advice for others that see this presentation that might be interested in either participating with your initiative directly or perhaps, attempting a similar initiative within their own sphere of influence.
Well, I've been an advocate of undergraduate research since I started teaching back in 1983. And more recently, at the last school I taught for, where I retired from, I directed a summer research program. And it was in computer graphics, animation, et cetera. But we tried to get students from all disciplines. So one summer we had a student from who was a transgender woman from the It was the music department. You know, may have had difficulty. In fact, I know, I will not name names, but when I told a fellow faculty member in the art department about what the student was doing, the faculty member said, "Oh, he's like that." He? This is a transgender woman. It should be she. So she was obviously the student was getting a little bit of, you know, pushback from her own faculty. Whereas I'm saying, I don't care. Come on in, work with us. And also in the sense of beneficial to other ways, I had two students who did very good work with us. One of them, he told me, he actually wrote a note to me saying that working on research helped him get his first job. And a second student said, working on the research with us helped him get not only a summer co-op, but then the year after get hired by the same company to continue working there. It really is true. I mean, I'm impressed by what Johannes and Rebecca are doing, because it provides students with opportunities to be engaged in something that they normally would not experience in their normal course load. It says, we're going to take you just that one step beyond what you do in your coursework. You're going to have to think for yourself. You're going to have to solve new, unique problems, novel problems. And I think that should be part of all education, but my experience is it's not.
Thanks. So Rebecca, how about your thoughts on this prompt here?
I think it's a little different for professional education because people are doing many things, juggling many things. And that's one of the challenges. They're fitting this in around their life and around their work. And we specifically, you know, since we were dealing with the UK and New York and California and trying to find a time zone that was going to be reasonable enough for everybody, we specifically said, since most of the educators were in the UK, we were going to choose a time zone that was going to be an evening time for them, to give them time to do it. And so, you know, that was kind of a challenge to find that. But and it allowed that group of people who wouldn't normally have time to take a class because they were busy teaching classes, it allowed them to take this class and to refresh and you know, upskill a little bit in an area where they were trying to get a handle on a very fast changing technology. So I think that was a success for a group of people that, you know, we were consciously trying to engage with. And then the mixing of people, you know, the education people who were, you know, trying to bring the next group into the field with people who were actually in the field and trying to understand new ways of doing things. I think that's a very, you know, productive conversation. I think it's a good mix, and it makes everybody meets people and gets a new point of view, and everybody has the chance to exchange ideas. So that was also, I think, a very, you know, it's always unexpected to the people that experience it, but for those of us who are arranging these experiences, it's kind of like, yeah, that's what we think it should happen. People should have serendipity and meet someone that they wouldn't meet, who's from working in a place that they never thought that kind of work was happening in, or doing a particular project that is a new idea, you know.
Did you end up having any participants as students that maybe hadn't worked on a, you know, globally distributed project before? I mean, the production industry in general is very global these days, but were there any unique or surprising outcomes to bringing this group from literally all around the world together to, you know, to work together in this kind of a setting?
Well, I think, you know, that happens. There was not a project with this because it was a very short time frame. It was 8 days, basically. So it was more of a, we'll see what happens, what kind of work they do in the future based on this, you know. And the thing about having Slack and some of these other tools at your disposal means that they can continue the conversation. They can continue to sort of bounce ideas off of each other. And that's a critically important part of the task of providing these experiences. You want to help people find each other and, you know, exchange ideas with each other as well. So I can't say that anybody tackled a new project. I mean, people were engaged in various kinds of projects when they entered this program, and they went on to perhaps alter how they were thinking about their projects, and just through meeting everybody doing different kinds of things in different parts of the world, I think that's really valuable. And you can't, that's what SIGGRAPH is all about, right? You come to SIGGRAPH to see people doing work that you hadn't even known existed. So that's one of the big benefits.
So before I jump back to Johannes, I have a specific question for you on this that you might actually be really uniquely suited to answering. This particular project you were participating in on the industry side, on the professional industry side, but you have experience in academics, and so I'm curious, do you have any thoughts or suggestions as to how this might be transferable to a more academic setting, or if there are any lessons that should be applied if any of us here on the academic side of things were to try to take on something similar?
Well, I don't know if I can answer that exactly, but that leads me to think about something that I often notice, is that when my time in academia was sort of, there's a certain pace that things move in, and industry is moving much faster. So that's hard. And to get things through all the committees and get all the approvals, as was mentioned by William too, it's hard to do something, rapid fire. And so, these short form things are kind of a way to do that. You're not proposing a whole course that's going to last a semester and is going to contribute to a degree. Maybe it's a seminar, maybe it's, a weekend dip your toes in kind of thing. And going the other way, I would say that a lot of, professional education is ahistoric. It's context free, and that's makes it less rich than it could be. And I think that it's always good. I'm most interested in the historical roots of things, and it's always good to bring that into the conversation with professional education, even when people don't think that's something that they really need to know. It informs everything. It gives you a framework. So I think both sides can sort of benefit from the techniques used on the other side.
Thanks so much. And so Johannes, that brings us back to you. And were there any? I mean, number one, the Bazaar itself just looks phenomenal, and I wish I was there. And
thanks.
I'm just curious as to were there any surprising outcomes that you can think of, and if there are other educators out there that see this that are like, oh, I think I'd like to try something like that at my school. If you have any suggestions.
Well, a lot of what Rebecca and Bill have been describing really resonate for me. I think in particular when Rebecca was talking about serendipity and the types of, as someone who gets to design a curriculum, I think about the affordances of that and how the structures really can inform the outcome, or if you're looking at it that way in terms of what's possible to happen within a given environment or a fixed amount of time. So before coming to Carnegie Mellon, I was at Yale University, and I had been the inaugural director of a center that was focused on collaborative arts research. And at that center, we would host classes. So we had the kind of like curricular model that was in place. But in addition to that, we sponsored a lot of visiting artists to come through at these kind of atelier workshop models where we would provide a budget and set a framework, a certain amount of time, a space, and maybe a conceptual framework, like some readings or a screening to kind of accompany a topic. And then the people who were there would respond. And over the course of a weekend or a week or however long, people being allowed the time and the space and the community that would emerge within that to respond to a prompt or respond to a theme, it was always surprising to see what came out of that. It was always, I think for everyone involved, it was surprising because it was beyond any one individual. And so I try to approach my curriculum that way as well. I had great partners in other programs. That was an important first step. So I work pretty closely with some colleagues in the School of Music, and we identified a space. And so that helped us. And we identified a point in time that I could communicate early on and say, we're building toward an event, an intermediate event. We don't know what it's going to be. We are defining that right now. So day one. And so having all that established early on was very helpful. And then within the class, providing the critical and conceptual framework through the reading materials, looking at historical models of collaboration. My background is as an artist, so I'm looking at artists who came through Bauhaus and Black Mountain College and Fluxus, and those provide really interesting models. But we talk about them in relationship to the affordances of today, the contemporary media of our time. A lot of talk of collaboration, happening internationally via electronic telecommunication platforms like Zoom. Where is that stuff relevant? What are the affordances of that versus our kind of live meeting versus other ways that we might come together? So I find that really interesting to talk about just and as a structure with a group of people or a class. We decide early on how do we want to frame a collaboration? What does collaboration even mean? Because it's such a slippery term. It means such different things to different people. And so the sooner we can come to some idea, some kind of collective idea about what that is in relationship to our goals and our experiences, and we can think about almost from like the standpoint of a designer, how you would think of affordances as a designer. How does the thing that we're trying to do present itself to us in a way, being sensitive to that? So in this case, we're designing an experience that's going to happen in a space. The space has certain affordances, and if we can be sensitive to that, that kind of sets us on a trajectory. And the time of year, we know it's early December in Pittsburgh. It's going to be wet and cold. We have to be sensitive to our environments. And then, the space was a very large space. We're really fortunate to have access to the large studio in WQED Studios, which is the site where Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was recorded. So, that has a certain history and certain affordances. So all of this kind of comes together in a way that, that we try to set a framework up early on, but then throughout the process, just, tune in and be sensitive to changes or things that we discover along the way. And it's I guess I'll just end it here by saying, one thing I stress with my students is like, there are artists who approach a question, or they approach a process of making with an agenda already in mind. And there are artists who approach the act of making with questions, looking for discovery. And I try to set that as a framework for the class. It's more about discovery. It's more about, the unknown than the known. And so the agendas kind of fall away, and we all meet in a neutral space if we're lucky and if it's done right. So anyway, that's all I'll say about that.
No, this is fantastic. We're nearing the end of our time, but I see William's hand is up, so I'm going to give the floor to him to wrap up.
I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to ask a question of everybody. Okay, and what Johannes is doing at Carnegie Mellon and what he was doing at Yale and Rebecca's doing is wonderful. But we're talking about the institutions where you are and the ones you work with are, in many respects, the upper echelon. What about that small college, not university, that small college somewhere out there in middle America or somewhere around the world, small college, maybe they got a total of 1,000 students total in the entire university. They got 1 and 2 people, departments, etc. How do we get them to get involved in these types of initiatives? I'll throw that out.
Oh, I have an answer for that. Get them involved in SIGGRAPH.
They can't afford it.
I think that thankfully the organization and disclaimer, yes, I'm on the education committee and I'm part of the conference committee for this year, so I'm in it. So this is not entirely an unbiased opinion. I'm looking across here, and there was a participant here earlier, and she'll be joining us in the final session of the day. But she's an instructor at a very small rural art and design college, and she came from having been to a SIGGRAPH conference once, and she's based East Coast, and so one of the first initiatives she did in joining that institution was to get connected to the SIGGRAPH student groups and initiate a chapter there, and she participates in chapters and with the conference. And for her, that has been a feed, a connection to the broader industry from this, a small rural institution. And so I apologize, I don't mean to tell her story, but and I saw her in the attendee list there, but there's my answer to that question is that in terms of, some of them can afford it. I believe now that, I will say that Natasha Warshawski will be joining us in session 5 today, and in our 3:45 to 4:30 segment to talk about the student chapters opportunities. And my understanding at the moment is that now the ACM organization will essentially provide a grant of a membership to ACM SIGGRAPH to the faculty member advisor for a student group. So there's no cost to the faculty or to the institution, and that the students, I do not believe, have a financial dues to pay to be members of SIGGRAPH. And so I think that that's one avenue. So
I was not talking about the cost of SIGGRAPH membership, nor coming to the conference.
I see.
I'm talking about all the other kinds of cost of trying to establish or become part of some group that is doing this more cutting edge educational experience for the students. When you talk about SIGGRAPH, there was a time many years ago when the education committee offered educator grants, which basically paid entire conference and a whole bunch of other materials, and basically help educators get to the conference. People who are just starting their careers. And I know because I got one of these grants twice in my career. I was actually one of the first 15 in the first group. But then money got tight, and that doesn't exist anymore. So what I'm saying is, if you talk locally for at the individual institution, I mean, what can happen to educate the educators of how to establish these kind of educational experiences for students? Right now we have 21 participants, 5 of us here, actually 4, okay, other than the meta participant right now, and 16 others. How many educators are out there worldwide, comparatively? I think that what Rebecca and Johannes are doing is absolutely fabulous. And my wish is, I wish we could get this kind of information out to even more people so they could learn what they could do or try to do.
So I love the idea. We are at the end of our time, or beyond it, honestly. So my hope will be that when we post this out to YouTube, that there will be educators that see this. And I would encourage all of you that happen to come across this to look us up, the educators here, and look at the other sessions from other soiree sessions, and feel free to reach out to us. I mean, we're here to share what we've been up to, and I know for myself for sure that the invitation is open, and would love to have ongoing conversations on that. And that's really the point of soirees. So I wish we could talk more right now, but thank you all panelists for sharing your amazing projects with us. And I will wrap up our recording for this before we get started on our next session.